Hello everyone. In today's video we're going to be taking a look at landing a twin-engine turboprop, this particular one being the King Air. Now this is pretty much the same aircraft as some of the other turboprops as far as performance goes. It just has an extra engine which complicates things in the event that something goes wrong. For those of you who are curious as to currently where we are, right here near St. Petersburg, right up on the outside here of course is the Baltic Sea. Let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we want to know about this aircraft is what our reference speed is going to be. Now this aircraft, because it has such a wide range of different weights it can be, has a drastically different landing speed. If we get it wrong, we're going to have different sorts of issues on a particular flight. So I'm going to go up to my weight and fuel and take a look, and I see that my current weight is 13,584 pounds out of 16,500 pounds. What that simply says is that ratio-wise, we're probably going to be about half of our typical approach speed. Now normally, your maximum approach speed on this aircraft is going to be about 109, 110 knots, and that's if you're very, very close to your 16,500. If you're in absolutely no weight, let's say you're about 10,000 pounds or less, you're looking at a 100 knot approach speed. So in our particular case, we're kind of halfway between the two, which gives us an approach speed of about 105 knots. And that's going to work pretty well for us. Now keep in mind, with any approach speed, if there is a wind, we're always supposed to be adding in half of the wind. If there's any gust factor, we're always supposed to be, of course, adding in any of the gust factor as well. So taking a look at the wind today, I'm going to take a quick gander here. We know down at ground level, we're looking at a 242. Our current runway heading that we're approaching at is going to be 273. So we're going to have a little bit of a crosswind, 242, 10 times 0.7, and it's going to be about a 5 knot, which is going to get us a final approach speed of right around 109 knots. Obviously, we're going to have to change that value as we approach, depending on what the actual nose ends up. Speaking of nose, during our approach, one thing I'm going to be constantly paying attention to is the ratio of what our horizon is versus what our aircraft is. As a general rule, this nose needs to be pretty much level on the whole way down to the flight, and we're only going to pull it up about 3 or 4 degrees for a flare. So if we did everything correct as we approach, whatever speed we end up with, and who knows, but as far as what this nose will be is pretty much in the same position we have it in right now. So on our way down to the airport itself, I noticed we have 4 little red lights. We're going to be interested in getting 2 reds and 2 whites. Generally, when you're landing a plane like this, you want to make sure that you get underneath the glide slope and then dive down onto it, or use an instrument approach to kind of act as a supplement. So let's go ahead and get this thing started. So first thing we're going to have to do is slow down and get ourselves right around the extension speed. We can extend the flaps on this particular aircraft at a staggering speed of 202 knots, which is insane. So we could actually put down our first notch of flaps now. Keep in mind we're frozen, so doing this is not going to have any negative consequences. As far as landing gear goes, we can't do anything with the landing gear until we get a little bit slower. As it stands right now, we're doing 183 knots. We could technically put the landing gear now, but that could be potentially dangerous. Obviously, if something goes wrong with the doors or something like that. So we're going to get down to about 166 knots before we go ahead and drop the landing gear down. So there's a 166. I'll go ahead and put the landing gear down. Now, the great thing about these 2 pieces here is they're going to help slow the aircraft down on its final approach. So now that we've gotten everything else all set up and it's looking pretty good, I'll go ahead and unfreeze the simulation and we'll make our way down to the ground. So the next thing I'm going to be interested in doing is getting slow enough to put down my last notch of flaps at the same time as getting the nose of the aircraft up to it. So taking a look at the end of the runway, I can see that I have exactly 1 white light. I'm going to go ahead and pull the throttle all the way back. Now I have 2 white lights telling me it's now time to approach. I noticed that I'm in the safe white zone for the aircraft, so I'm going to go ahead and deploy my next notch of flaps. And when you put those flaps down, man, will this thing start slowing down in a hurry. Taking a look at the end of the runway now, I can see that I have 3 whites and 1 red, because again, my flap deployment should have been done at a lower speed. Okay, so our goal now is, of course, to hold the nose here and get our airspeed as close to that 105 knots as we possibly can. And again, depending on what happens and depends on our approach, we might have to make constant adjustments to it. All right, so I see that I have 2 white lights, 2 red lights, and I can see my airspeed is about 104 knots, but I can also see that my nose is basically dead on the horizon, meaning that the speed that we have chosen is actually fairly accurate. So if we're not having any adjustments as far as what's going on as far as a glide slope, there's some turbulence for us. A bunch of the tourists over there at the Hermitage, I'm sure. Making our way down, I'm just taking a look, about 105 knots. We still have 2 whites, 2 reds. Getting a bit of a crosswind here. We'll use a little bit of a crab angle. Watching the radar altimeter tick down, we can see that I'm about 104, 105 knots. Looks pretty good so far. My nose is right on the horizon, meaning my speed's almost perfect. Now, one of the killers with this is in the event of an emergency and we lose an engine, we can't apply full power to the other engine, otherwise we will spiral out of the sky. We'd have to actually apply partial throttle in order to get us going, or we'd have to nose down to quickly get ourselves up to the emergent speed of 111 knots to have full control of the airplane. So I'm noticing I'm starting to get a little low, so I'm just going to hold the nose nice and steady. No quick adjustments. Now what's going to happen is we're going to go from very low to very high all of a sudden. This is a function of your head position inside the aircraft. All right, looks pretty good. We're just aiming for the big old touchdown spot. Now what I'm going to do is smoothly start backing the throttle up just a little bit at a time. So now the aircraft has no throttle. We continue to sink. We're going to go ahead and get within a couple feet of the ground. We're going to lift the nose up to about 3 or 4 degrees, which is holding pretty much right there. And we're just going to wait for the nice gentle thump thump. If you find that the aircraft takes a mile and a half to actually set down, it's just usually a function of the fact that you probably came in just a little bit fast. In this case, our nose is down on the ground. We let it sink down, and we go ahead and use quite a bit of right foot here in order to keep us from weather vaning right into that very, very strong crosswind that we have experiencing right there. That's really all there is to it. Now, being a propeller aircraft that's small, what you can actually do is come in for a landing and land on the numbers as opposed to the touchdown point should you desire to do so. It's completely a function of how much runway you have and how well you're willing to bring it down. Enjoy.